All right, so we are now in the month of Adar. The month of Adar is a poll with it's the month right before one start of the year, right, which is Nisan, and it has it's polar opposite in a month that comes towards the end or towards right before another start of the year, right, which is the month of Av. It's not the last month before the month of Tishrei, but it's the second to last month, and they are polar opposites in the fact that it says Mishenichnas Adar Marbim b'simcha, we add in joy. Mishenichnas Av Mima'atin b'simcha, as Av enters, we decrease in joy. Now, the thing is like this. The Judaism has a very fascinating take on the nature of time, or the nature of events associated with specific times. And this is what Jerry was hinting to, or not hinting to, but it was alluding to or discussing, which is that for the most part, the 4th of July, right, was a day like any other, a regular day on the calendar. And then it happened to be that, as things played out, as events played out, that became the day that a whole bunch of people in the Continental Congress declared independence, right? And so now that day, that event establishes that day. And this kind of is the general attitude regarding special days on the calendar, that the event creates the day. Judaism,
but also that event only happened in that year.
Correct. So that was an event that occurred then.
Right. We're not told that we should feel as if it happened to us.
Well, right. Well, because simply put, because it was one event, it was a one-time event, and we are commemorating the anniversary of that event, and we bring it up in our memories. Such a significant event, we bring it up again and again. But the event occurred then. Judaism has a different attitude. For example, let's take it from the bad to the good. We say that many of you are familiar with that when the month of Av comes in, that sad month that leads to the kind of its low point, its nadir or nadir is the 9th of Av, right? Tisha B'Av. And we know that in the lead up to it, not only should you be in a state of mourning and deprivation, right? We deliberately, from the beginning of the month all the way through, already from the 3 weeks out, right? From the 17th of Tammuz, we are already in a general state of mourning, a light state of mourning. But once the month of Av starts, we go into an acute state of mourning. We don't eat meat, we don't listen to music, we don't cut our hair, we don't schedule weddings and etc. All that because we're in a state of mourning, in a state of national mourning. But then, what most people are not necessarily familiar with is that we also don't do things that are potentially dangerous, or we don't schedule court cases. Why? Because we say about these days that these are days muchan lepuraniot. These are days that are set aside, as it were, for negative events to occur. I.e., kind of what Jerry was saying, that there is a spirit to time. These days are days where bad things happen. In other words, it's not the event that made the day, but rather the day that creates the events that happen in it,
right,
or that magnetize or foment the events that occur. And as I said, we're going to mention and get out of the way the negative so we then can turn and focus on the positive, because we're in such a time. The month of Adar, it says, just as in a sense the polar opposite, that if one has a court case, they should avoid scheduling it in the month of Av. It says if one has a court case, they should try to schedule it in the month of Adar, because this is a month that has a spirit of joy and triumph and success, right? We know this. You don't even have to go into the Midrash for this. This is written into the story of the Megillah, right? Haman wanted to see that not only does he have the political backing of Achashverosh, but he has, in a sense, spiritual backing, right? Because if he wasn't concerned about that, then how would he decide? How would he go about deciding which day should be the day of the decree of the annihilation of the Jewish people? He would go look. He would go look on the calendar, see what is the day, the most pragmatic day, or the most practical day. What's the day that people are, let's make it a day in the middle of the summer. We got a long day, daylight, a lot of daylight. So, so the people could go out and, really get the job done, as it were, or whatever it is. He would be taking political factors and practical factors. He doesn't do any of that. How does he choose the day for when he is going to decree the annihilation?
Right. With lots.
Right. That gives the whole name to the holiday. He peeled poor, right? He does a lottery, right? You ever wondered of all the names that this holiday could have? It seems to be the silent.
That's
the point. It's not. It's
Yeah,
not.
the rabbi made that big point about pool and pool. Yeah,
Yes.
but I guess it just went by me.
Yes, but this is what the point is. He was reaching for spiritual backing. He said, let me throw lots that no, in a sense, physical or material effect on it, and it will be entirely driven by spiritual. If this falls out on this particular day, whatever it is, he throws the lots and it falls out when? In the month of Adar. And he says, this is a great development. Why? Who cares? Who cares what day? The development is if you manage to marshal the political capital, the political will, and the interest of the people to go ahead and do your plan. Who cares what day on the calendar it falls out? The answer is because time has an effect on the events that occurs. There's certain energies, there's certain elements. And what does he know about the month of Adar? He says, Samach bo, he became happy because he says, this is the Chodesh Shemetz bo Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the month in which Moshe Rabbeinu died. It's a month of weakness for the Jewish people. Their greatest leader died in this month. This is a good month for me to act against the Jewish people. It says, a baskol, a heavenly voice said, fool. You think this is a bad month for the Jewish people because Moshe died. Do you know what happened on the same day that Moshe died? Moshe was born. So this happens to be a great month for the Jewish people. He also said, look, what is the mazal of this month? What is the zodiac sign? Zodiac sign is a fish. He says, fish, a big fish comes and swallows a little fish, right? I'm going to be that big fish that swallows the little fish, the Jewish people. To which the heavenly voice said, yeah. You know what happens to that big fish that swallows the little fish? It gets swallowed by an even bigger fish. So I would gauge where you are in this pond. On the smaller side of the ledger or the bigger side, you're kind of going up against God Himself. So you may want to rethink who's the big fish here. Having said all that, we have a general understanding that time and is if this is just as much the month of Adar as it was back in the days of Purim, which means the potency of that spirit holds true as much today as it held back then. And Purim is just as much Purim. In fact, we say this on all holidays, and the quote, Hayamim ha'elu niskarim v'naisim. We say this about every holiday. Hayamim ha'elu, these days, niskarim, are remembered v'nasim, and also are active. These days are not only remembered, but they are currently active, which speaks to the point that we're not commemorating an event that occurred thousands of years ago. Rather, we are re-engaging with this event in its current iteration. It is just as real today. Anybody know where that quote comes from? This quote about universally about all days and all holidays, that they are not just remembered, but they are active.
See, I would have guessed Pesach.
It's in the Megillah about Purim.
Oh, that's right.
It's towards the very end of the Megillah. This is how kind of Mordechai and Esther sign off after having told the story of Hayamim Ha'elu Niskarim V'Naisim B'chol Dor V'Dor.
Oh,
Every
you said
generation.
that part.
Right? The Chol Mishpacha, Mishpacha, the Ir V'Ir, right? For all families in every city, in every tribe, etc., etc.
And now we're going to test you, Rabbi. What's the citation of that quote?
Where is it?
Yeah, in the
It's the
Megillah.
very
Yeah.
end of the 9th chapter.
Okay.
Very end of the ninth chapter, probably about 3 or 4 verses from the end of the 9th chapter. And the Yemei HaPurim Ha'ela, it says the days of these Purim will never be lost. Will never, and in fact, the Talmud then says that when in time of Mashiach it says, Kol HaMoadim Atidin Libatel, all holidays will eventually be nullified because of the great aura of just the one great Shabbat that is the times of the era of Mashiach, except for Purim. Purim will be the one that lasts, because as the Torah it says, "V'zichram le'yasu mizaram," that Purim will never be nullified. So I want to actually talk a little bit about it. Why Purim is so special, and how it connects to this week's parsha. Anybody know the well-known glaring omission in the Megillah?
God's name.
God is not good. God's name is not in the Megillah. Anybody know a parallel in the Torah portion that is most often read right before Purim? This week's Torah portion, Parsha Tetzaveh, also has a famous glaring omission. Anybody? God's name is in this week's Parsha. That's not going to be the answer. From the moment Moshe is born until the end of the Torah, his name is in every Parsha, except this one.
Wait a minute.
Tetzaveh.
Wait a minute. Who is being Tetzaveh?
Paul, you're stealing my thunder. Don't be too smart here. Yeah,
No.
because you're 100% right, but we're going to get to that in a minute. The only parsha that does not say the name Moshe from the moment he's born, basically from the first portion of the book of Shemot. Shemot va'ira bo b'shal chitro mishpatim truma tetzaveh truma, well not tetzaveh, ki tisa v'yakal pekudei v'yikar tzav shmini tazrim mitzar achrim od kedoshim emor bahar b'chol katali b'midbar nasu b'alotcha shalach korach chukas balak pinchas matos mazri torim v'et chanan ekev re'ei shoftim kitete kitav v'netzaveh hazinu v'zot bracha. Every last parsha has Moshe's name, not only once, multiple times. One parsha in that entire repertoire does not have Moshe's name. Parsha Tetzaveh. So it's noticeable. Many commentaries jump on it. Here is the midrash on this, which is beautiful. The midrash draws on another pasuk in the Torah where Moshe is facing off with God. The parsha right after this one, Parshat Ki Tisa, right? The Jewish people bring the golden calf, and God turns around and says, "What is His response going to be to it?"
Let's destroy everybody, everything.
I'm hitting the reset button, not on the whole world, but on the Jewish people, right? I'm going to start, and I'm going to start again. I'm going to start from scratch with you, Moshe, right? I'm going to start from scratch with you. To which Moshe responds that what?
If you take me out, take my name out, then.
If you take them out, take me out, right? Basically. Either you forgive the people and kind of give them a way to rehabilitate themselves, or im ayin mechenina misifrecha asher katafta. Erase me, please, from this book which you have written. right? This is Moshe throwing in his lot with his people, which is a remarkable thing, because the one person who has an alibi, right, about the golden calf is
Moshe, he wasn't there.
Moshe. He wasn't there, right? Right? You can't say Moshe with the golden calf at the foot of Sinai, right? That's the, the game of Clue, right? The professor in the living room with the wrench or whatever it is. You can't say Moshe at Sinai with the golden calf. He wasn't there, and yet he's the only one entirely innocent of this. And yet he says, and that's what God is saying. You're the one truly innocent person in this whole picture. So I'm going to give you the greatest legacy of all. You're not going to just be the people's savior. You're not just going to be the people's teacher. You're not going to only be Moshe Rabbeinu. You're going to become Moshe Rabbeinu and Moshe Avinu. I'm going to start everything from you. To which Moshe says, no. I already have my people. These are my people. I already have my flock and my children. These are my flock and these are my children. And I'm going to stick with them, and I cajole you, God, to stick with them as well. And if, God, you're going to, if their fate is to be erased, then my fate shall be the same. And not only should I be physically erased, take me out of this book. And as a everlasting monument to Moshe's willingness to sacrifice everything, including his legacy, right? Because at the end of the day, what does a person live for? What does a person sacrifice for, right? Most people say, I live, for most people in this world live for themselves, right? Live for themselves. Those that live for a higher purpose, then at least, right, if I'm going to die, at least my legacy. I should be remembered for this sacrifice, right? Moshe was saying, for the sake of sacrifice, I'm willing myself and my whole legacy to go into oblivion. I will never be remembered. Take me out of the book. And God says, and all for the sake of a people, Moshe, that turned their back not only on God, but on you. Remember, what was the main reason they were trying to make the golden calf originally? To replace who?
Right.
Moshe?
He was coming back.
Moshe ish asher hotzenu mitzrayim lo yadanu mehal yilo. This Moshe who took us out of Egypt, we don't know where he is. He's half an hour late. Let's replace him. Right?
And from then on, Jews were never late.
From then on, all rabbis are late because they said we learned from Moshe. But anyways, the point is that we see that that these people, what God is saying is they don't deserve it, and Moshe says, I don't care. I'm throwing in with these people. I'm sacrificing everything, not only my life, but even my legacy, for the sake of these people. And God says, Moshe, you will be forever remembered. You are willing to be totally forgotten. You will be forever remembered. Not only will your name be in the book, but you will also be remembered for this willingness. And so one Torah portion will be devoid of your name. And when people ask why, this will be the answer. Because Moshe was willing to have his name taken out of the entire Torah for the sake of his people. This will be that monument. This portion will be the monument to that willing sacrifice. So that's a beautiful point in its own right. But as we said, nothing in Torah is by chance. The fact that this portion is read right before Purim, and that Purim, the Megillah, also has this unique omission of all the 24 volumes in the entire Torah, in the entire Bible. Only one of them does not have God's name in it, and that is the Megillah. That is, by the way, just as a matter of a kind of little anecdotal detail, and kind of a little insider baseball. If somebody is studying to become a sofer, to become a scribe, in a sense, their PhD thesis, right? Their final work that they have to do in order to earn status is to write something, right? Is to write a scribed work. What scribed work is the kind of that PhD thesis, that first um, work that, in a sense, defines you as a sofer,
Should be the Megillah because God's name isn't there.
Megillah, for that reason.
Right, in case they make a mistake.
Exactly, because
Bingo.
you write anytime you write, even a mezuzah, right, which is the smallest piece of scribed work. Once you write God's name, you can't go back, because you would have to erase all the way back to your mistake. And if God's name comes in between, you're not allowed to erase God's name. So that's it, you're done. You put in X number of hours of work. You made one mistake, but you didn't notice it until you left one letter out, or you added a letter, or whatever it is. And now you can't go back. So the first thing you write is a Megillah, because a Megillah you can go all the way back. In fact, because it doesn't have God's name, not only can you go all the way back, you can leave a whole bunch of letters out of the Megillah, and it's still a kosher Megillah.
Wow.
And you want to guess about how many letters you can leave out of the Megillah?
How many?
Up till half, and it's still a kosher Megillah.
Oh, that's how you get away with the 18 minutes.
Right, exactly. I have scored a Megillah the most. No, but the point is a Megillah is the most forgiving of all scribed texts for that reason. But that's, as I said, that's a little bit of an anecdotal information. Back to our main topic. It is an interesting thing that the Megillah doesn't mention God at all. Now, we can either say that's just a kind of a unique quirk. It just happened that way, that by the time the Megillah was finished being written, all of a sudden we look back and say, hey, you know what? We did this without God's name in it. Huh? How do you like that? Nothing in Torah is like that. If God's name's not in it, it's for a very deliberate reason. And why is God's name not in the Megillah? Because honestly, that's exactly how the story played out on the surface. On the surface, there was not any open miracles. There was no supernatural event, right? In fact, it leads many people to assume about the Purim story that even if it happened, it was a series of fortunate events, right? Right? Reverse Lemony Snicket over here, right? This is a series of fortunate events, right? It just so
somebody could read it and be an atheist and say,
right.
that's just the Jewish story.
Yeah, this is
They
an
tried to
interesting.
kill us. We won. Let's eat.
Yeah, it's an interesting political story. A lot of right. It has all the good. It has all the characters for a really great story or play, right? Which is why Purim plays are, it's got right. In fact, there's a song that speaks to that. That it says. הכל נמצא במגילה, יש פה מלך ומלכה, יש חכם ויש רשע, הכל נמצא במגילה, right? It has everything. It has a king and a queen, it has a wise hero, and it has an evil, an evil villain. It's got everything. The whole part of the story's got everything. And it just so happened that Achashverosh, who was a drunkard, it just so happened that his wife Vashti treated him like dirt and beneath her. He gets furious. It just so happened that his new queen is a Jewish woman. Just so happens, right? Everything could just so happen, right? Just so happened Mordechai gets appointed a minister. It just so happens that Mordechai hears Bigtan and Teresh talking. It just so happens that Haman is a little too overzealous. It just so happens that Esther is in the right place at the right time, and yada, yada, yada. So on the surface, where's God? Not there, right? You can say that God's not there. God's not involved in the story. And by the way, that's exactly what most Jews of that time felt. The temple had been destroyed. They're living in exile. Do you realize that of all the holidays, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Hanukkah, Purim, only one of the holidays is a diaspora holiday. Is a holiday that occurred, and its entire timeline is the diaspora. Pesach is the temple, right? We're talking about the way the Shalosh Regalim. Pesach, yes, of course, it occurred in Egypt, but Pesach becomes celebrated in the temple. The highlight of Pesach, the epitome of Pesach, is in the temple. Sukkot, Shavuot, etc. These are shalosh regalim. Hanukkah occurs where? In Israel.
And
What did you-
And Purim occurs where, from beginning to end?
Persia.
outside.
Persia. Persia. This
Isn't that why
was-
there's a Hallel question about,
yeah, that's one of the reasons that we don't say Hallel is because
Yeah.
there isn't the Israel element. It's not a complete holiday in that sense. So that's one answer. But on the other hand, it actually makes a deeper point. So the bottom line is the Jewish people at that time thought they were past the age of miracles and divine intervention. They're sitting here in exile under ruthless kings, right? Their Sanhedrin has been disbanded. And at that point, God has abandoned them, or so they can make themselves believe, which is why at that point, when Achashverosh invites them to the state dinner, in which he is serving, using the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash, what an insult. He himself is walking around in a drunken stupor, wearing the vestments of the Kohen Gadol. They're celebrating the fact that the prophecy of Yechaniah is not being fulfilled, of the Jews' return. That's what they were celebrating. That's why the Megillah tells us this was in the third year of his reign, right, of Achashverosh's reign, because that the third year of his reign is 70 years from the exile, which was a prophecy that the Jewish people will return. And so he says that's what Belshazzar, what Balthazar was celebrating with the hand on the wall, right, the writing on the wall, which we get that expression from. And here it is, he says, oh, they made a miscalculation, it should have counted from a different point. It's really now the temple's not rebuilt, haha, the Jewish God has been defeated. So the party was to celebrate, in their mind, the death of the Jewish God. They were doing it with insulting and lauding the fact that they had the vessels and the vestments of the Beit HaMikdash. It was served, treif was being served, and the Jewish people not only felt compelled to go, but were proud to go. Nenin misudato shalosa rasha. They were happy to go because, hey, we were invited to a party in the seat of power. We're being invited to state dinners. We're being treated like citizens or whatever, right? Well, we have to go. We have to go because right now the power that is Achashverosh. And we have to throw in with him. He's the power. He's the new golden calf.
Hmm.
And we have no choice. We have no choice. Sure, it would be nice to stay Jews, proud Jews, separate Jews, and stay loyal to God. But look, God's not around. When God's not around, then there's Achashverosh. And if he's willing to invite us in the party, even though if the party is a very insult to God, we gotta go. And that's because God's not around.
God was 5 minutes late, so they had to build another golden calf.
Or their mistake was, what do we call this? Megillat what?
Esther.
Esther.
Esther means hidden.
Hidden. Vanochi hastir astir panai bayamahu. And I will hide my face. Doesn't mean I'm gone, it means I'm hidden. And so when the Jewish people say, God, we got this taken care of, we don't need your help anymore, we got Achashverosh now. So what happens at that moment? God says, okay, let's try it your way. I'm going to take my hands off. Let's see how long this lasts. Right? Miyad, immediately comes the wolf, Haman, right? To attack the 70, to attack the sheep. Right, the 7, right? We are kivsa achat. We're like one sheep among 70 wolves. So no surprise that it doesn't even take a minute before Haman comes and he starts putting his plan into action. Right, his plan that he's been waiting for. His plan that is 7 generations. This has been waiting. Since when? Since the defeat and near annihilation of the entire nation of Amalek, the Jewish people's
Oh, yeah.
arch enemy.
His uncle,
And not his uncle, but his
descendant,
descendant,
Right.
his antecedent,
His progenitor.
antecedent, that's right.
right? Haman ben Hamdata Ha'agagi, the Agagite. Agag, king of Amalek. He's of royal blood, this Haman. And he is carrying with him the generations long vendetta. And the moment comes and he senses, and in fact, that was his nefarious plot from the get-go. Everybody here is manipulating Achashverosh. Who convinces Achashverosh to have this feast in the first place? Haman. Who convinced him to invite the Jews? Haman. Who convinces him that he should be wearing the vestments of the Kohen Gadol? And we say, Haman. Why? Because Haman knows the truth about the Jewish people. That if the Jewish people have God on their side, there's no stopping them. But if you can somehow drive a wedge between the Jewish people and God, then they're just as vulnerable as any other people. The Jewish people can only be defeated from within. And so Haman does this. And that's why Haman wants to see because Haman is very aware of the spiritual powers at play. That's why he throws his pur, his lot. When it comes out in Adar, he thinks, great, clearly heaven is allowing me to go forward with this. And finding the month of the Jewish weakness. Now, here steps in the hero. Mordechai and Esther. And Mordechai and Esther are so, right? What does Mordechai say to Esther? Im hacharesh tacharishi ba'it hazot, right?
Maybe this is the time you were chosen for. Oh my gosh, I just wrote this.
Yes. What does Mordechai say? God has never abandoned.
Oh my gosh.
God has never abandoned his people. God will save them as long as we cry out. And what did Mordechai do? Did he immediately go and try to sit there and use his connections, go into the palace, seek an audience with the king, try to argue the case that the Jewish people are needed, they're tax-paying citizens, they bring certain benefits? No. Who does he recognize is the power?
Esther.
God.
Oh, excuse me.
He immediately puts sackcloth and ashes, tells the people we need to repent.
She tells me to ask.
Gathers 22,000
right
children to study Torah in public. Can you imagine? They're being threatened for annihilation because they're Jews. What would be the advice of any pragmatic and practical thinker? Lie low, right? You're being targeted for your Jewishness. Mordechai,
Or go beg the king.
Out into the streets and is learning Torah. He's being as Jewishly and openly as possible. Because he realizes Achashverosh and Haman are not the ones holding the power. They're not in a sense, the arbiters of our downfall or the arbiters of our salvation. It's all God. And he awakens God, as it were. God allowed himself to go into a slumber. And Mordechai's efforts and him and Esther together, Mordechai, and he says, you should also, right? Esther says, I will fast. Why is she fasting? Who is she fasting for? Is that the way you want to go before a king looking haggard and drawn and worn out?
Well, the king is God.
Ah, the king, right? The true king. Mordechai and Esther recognize the truth that behind the scenes, it's always God. It's always been God. Now, here's the little secret about the Megillah. On the one hand, God's name is not there blatantly and obviously. However, if you know how to look one layer deeper, then God is very much present. There's an old tradition, in fact, they even make Megillahs this way, where every column begins with which word? Hamelech, the king. It's called a Hamelech Megillah. You can get it, where every column, they work the calligraphy to begin with the word Hamelech. Why? Because
Oh my God, in the mom store you have that. You know, the whole beginning of the service is Hamelech.
Right. Yes. Yes. Hamelech.
That's the
Talmud
reference.
tells us is that if there is no qualifier, it doesn't say Hamelech Achashverosh or the king of Persia or whatever
Right,
it is, it
right,
just
right.
says the king,
Right.
that is actually alluding to not Achashverosh, but the king, capital T, capital K. And I don't mean Elvis,
Mhm.
right? Hamelech is God, right? That's why when the sixth chapter begins, Balayla hu nadadah shnat hamelech. On that night, the king's slumber was broken. They say that you are meant to raise your voice. The one who's reading the Megillah, raise it. Balayla hu nadadah shnat hamelech. The king's slumber was shaken. He was shaken out of his slumber. And the truth is, why? Because as the Shalah says, that's the turning point of the story. Not really. Oh yes, really. Because which king's slumber was disturbed? Not Achashverosh.
Hamelech.
God. God wakes up because immediately before that was Mordechai gathering everybody, telling us, and everybody's fasting, right? Sumo alai, fast for me 3 days and 3 nights. The Jewish people begin their process of teshuvah, and the king wakes up, right? And the triumphant end to chapter 8. V'chamas hamelech shachacha, and the king's anger subsided, right? Now, if you understand that Hamelech is a reference to God, and you count up all the Hamelechs, then what do you have all of a sudden? God is referenced percentage-wise in the Megillah more than any other book of scripture.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Isn't that
I
amazing?
love it. I love it.
So that's the entire story of Purim. On the surface, you don't see God, but if you know how to look a layer deeper, there is God. He's been there the whole time. In fact, he's more there, more present when a parent is hiding from the child to teach the child a lesson about looking, right? The attentiveness of the parent on the child is actually stronger, right? Is the child looking? Does the child know? Is this the moment? And that's the point. That's why of all holidays, Purim will last. Because Purim talks to every group of Jews in any situation, in any circumstance, including here, deep, deep in exile. It is the exile holiday. It is the holiday that says, I don't see God, obviously. I don't see miracles in the temple on a daily basis. We're not in the Holy Land. The divine presence is not everywhere we look. The powers that be are the American president and the UN and whatever it is. And I could fall into a despair. And the Megillah is telling us, look one layer deeper, right? Well, look at this parsha. This parsha doesn't have Moshe's name here, right? You can assume that Moshe is not present in this parsha, right? But what is the very first word of this parsha?
It's Amen.
Ve'ata. And you, Tetzaveh, shall command the people. Who's God talking to? Who's you?
Moshe.
Moshe. The whole parsha is God talking to Moshe in the first person. That's why he's not called Moshe in the parsha. Right? Because that would be Moshe in the third person. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe. That's Moshe at a little bit of a distance.
Yep.
This parsha is Vi'ata. The very first word of the parsha is a reference to Moshe. The whole parsha is God talking to Moshe. Moshe is more present in this parsha than in any other parsha. But you have to know how to look a little bit. You have to look past the surface. And that is a very, very, very important message, both in the Parsha and in the Megillah. Don't be an idiot, right? The Talmud uses as a way to explain, in a sense, the trap that the Jewish people fell in. is that their father is carrying a child on his shoulders, protecting the child from all the dangers that are there on the ground in the wilderness. And the father is faithfully and caringly carrying the child. And somebody comes over to the child and says, "Where's your father?" And the child looks around and doesn't see his father, right? Because his father's under him. And he says, "He's not here." Oh, the father says, "Isaiah, okay, I'm not here." Puts the child down. Says, "Let's see how long this lasts," right? Let's not be a child. Let's not be foolish, right? We are living miracles. The very fact of the Jewish people, do you hear this? There's a study going on. Everybody's like really excited about this. Like, I'm relatively ambivalent, but this big, well-known professor who is an epidemiologist, right, said, what's religion going to look like by 2050? Says Christianity is gone, basically. Says it's a shadow of itself. Says Islam, it's a big question mark. So it doesn't really have. He says Judaism, consistent. Everybody knows this. The Jewish people, we, all the time, right? They have
A great fetish.
right, and we can either turn around and say, yeah, take it for granted and say, but when I need God, you're not here, right? Hello, are you here? If you're here, that's because I'm here.
Mhm. To the fact that we still exist.
We are a walking miracle. God is very much involved, not just back in the days of the temple, not just in the days of the great sages and the Babylonian Talmud and all that. God is here. Purim is our story. Purim.
Rabbi, just this morning in our study, Howie and I were discussing this, and if the answer is too long, just tell me and that's fine. Why do we keep making the same mistakes?
Because that is part of the psyche, the way God created us. He created us with a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara has a vested interest in having us always look in the wrong direction.
And it wins.
It wins a lot, but it doesn't have to always win, and it doesn't even have to win a lot. That's up to us, though. Because if not, we might as well be angels. If there wasn't opposition,
Right.
then God already has that. God has already default righteous beings. And the truth is, he doesn't need them because he is the ultimate default righteous being. What is it that we bring to the table? We bring the table the possibility for failure, which then gives us the ability to succeed and triumph. If you can't fail, you can't succeed.
Mm.
I didn't even know that you would put it in this context. When people used to ask me, why do you think that the kibbutz movement in Israel has died down? And I said, because people didn't have the right to fail there. And people would always say, what are you saying?
Yeah, no, I think that.
But I know people who've left, and that's basically it. They didn't have the right to fail, so they didn't have the right to succeed. Everything was just provided for them, like manna from heaven, from the day they were born till the day they died, and they were leaving in droves.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying is that because it's the only place in the world where socialism actually succeeded
For a time.
was the kibbutz.
Right.
But as you said, even that eventually, because it goes against human nature.
That's what I try to explain to people.
But that explains why we keep making mistakes. You started this discussion of the Megillah by outlining the same mistake that we've made in the past with Chet HaEgel, and that we make Ad Hayom Hazeh. It's the same mistakes that we make. Why couldn't we be at least a little more creative in the mistakes we make? I don't mean that.
And so the answer is we are creative because it's always a variation on the theme. We never make the exact same mistake.
Okay. No,
They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Oh, that's
I
great.
love that. I
love
love that, Jerry.
I have never heard that one, but I am definitely filing that one away.
Feeling that one.
Yes, definitely stealing that one. But 100%. The bottom line is It wasn't a golden calf. It was Achashverosh. It wasn't, every single time it's a little bit different. But at the end of the day, that's why the Torah remains an eternal guidebook, because it always, to a certain degree, the lessons play out in. It always is going to be some version of the struggle and the dichotomy between the material and the spiritual. If you think about it, every mistake in judgment is going to be some version of that. That's what the Jewish people were struggling through the entire time they were in the desert, which is why the Torah highlights this period, because it's the Jewish people's training into walking that tightrope. Sometimes they err too much to the physical, right? We want barbecue, right? The manna from heaven. We don't want the spiritual bread. We want barbecue. Let's go back to Egypt where we had the barbecue. Or sometimes they err too much to the spiritual, right? We don't want to go into the land of Israel because then we become farmers. We like it a lot better here, surrounded by clouds of glory, getting manna from heaven, learning Torah from the greatest Torah teacher of all time. The second we cross into the land, all that dissipates, right? The clouds of glory are gone. We're becoming farmers and spending most of our days elbow deep in the soil. We want to stay entirely spiritual. It's always and learning from their learning, it teaches us how to navigate those things in our life. Sometimes we focus too much on God. Sometimes we focus, what does that mean? What do you mean? How can you focus so much on God? Because then we forget we have a purpose here, something that we need to accomplish here. And sometimes we're very focused here, we forget about God, and i.e. therefore also forget about our purpose. It's always going to be a balance. An angel is all the way up there, and animals are all the way down there, and a human being is right in the middle. A perfect blend of both. A soul in a body, a piece of God in the material. And sometimes the material lens that the Yitzhar says, the evil condition says, no, right? What is our current Achashverosh?
Oh my God. We have
Just
to-
one?
Wall Street. For our 401k, right? Or so we have to. God says, "Don't
We
work
have to,
on Shabbos."
we have to
I have
have
to.
money to live.
I
Yeah.
have to work on Shabbos. That's the path, because that's the way the world is. Wall Street dictates. Does the work week include Saturday or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That's the real power. Sunday's a day
Money.
off. Saturday's not. Who decided that? Oh, the powers. The powers that be. The power that be is God. Stop serving the golden calf. Right? Or the iron bull, or whatever the brass bull that's the symbol, that's Wall Street's symbol. Literally, it's like, how amazing is it that the symbol in front of the New York Stock Exchange is a metal bull? It's like, there is the golden calf. Like, does it have to be any more obvious?
The calf
Right?
grew up.
Right?
Yeah, but power is in there also.
No, so of course, right? Or you're not necessarily the golden calf, but it might be the donkey or the elephant, right?
Right.
The point is that at the end of the day, we are facing this, and that's why we look at the story of the Megillah, and it's our story. We read the Megillah, this is our story. In fact, it says, Hakore et ha-Megillah lemafreya, lo yatsa, which literally translates, one who reads the Megillah backwards has not fulfilled their obligation. Wow, that was brilliant, Rabbi. I would not have assumed that I can't.
What does that mean?
Right? No, literally it means you can't read the Megillah backwards, going from the last word backwards, right?
And who would want to do that?
Not only who would want to do that, who would think that would be a kosher reading in the first place, right? Obviously, it's not kosher. The answer is no. One who reads the Megillah in the past tense has not fulfilled their obligation. If you're reading the Megillah
That
as
gets
a story
back to
that
the whole
happened
thing.
back then, you've missed the point. The Megillah is not talking about an event that occurred 2,500 years ago. The Megillah is talking about an event that is occurring right now. All right, everybody?
Wow.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful. Tuesday morning, 8:30.
8:30 is when we begin the davening. We'll get to the Megillah at about 9.
I'll do a little davening. Oh, it's not a problem, right?
Paula, it is a serious problem that you come out and daven with us.
I'm going to give you such a patch. Okay.
Of course, it'll be a serious problem if you don't come daven with us.
I'm looking forward to it. Really. Im Yirtzeh Hashem.
It's actually-
Okie dokie.
All right, everybody.
Thank you,
I wanna
Rabbi.
say
By the
happy
way,
birthday.
oh,
I
I
didn't
forgot
have
to
a
make a
chance.
point. So if you think now, rethink all the kind of traditions associated with Purim through the lens that the Purim's whole message is uncovering that which lies one layer deep. What is the traditional treat of Purim? A muntash, not a hamantash. That was actually an erroneous mistake. That was a mistake.
Right, because why would you call it
Right? Why in the world would you name
a Hitler cookie?
Right, as I said, right, Jerry knows my riff on this. It's like saying, "Here, have a Hitler cookie," right?
Okay.
Why in the world do you name this treat after the villain who wanted to eradicate the Jewish people, right? So it actually originally was called the muntash.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
Hash is a pocket. Mun is what? Poppy seed, which is what they had
Right,
then for a sweet
right.
feeling. The
My
point,
grandmother only used mun.
the theme has nothing to do about the Haman's hat or Haman's ears. These are all later
Right.
mishagas. It was a treat in which you had a filling that was covered by an outer layer.
Oh,
Teaching the kids, on the surface, you just see a boring piece of dough. Take a bite. There's something.
Esther again. Oh, that's great.
Isn't that unbelievable?
I love
Yes.
There's
it.
the other tradition of Purim. Masks, getting dressed.
Right, of course.
One thing on the surface, there's something else beneath the surface.
Okay.
That's
Absolutely.
the entire theme of Purim. Everything about Purim revolves around this idea. Now you know. Now you can be the smartest, snarkiest person in the room. I bet you. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Right?
you know I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. Well, you're going to ruin the hamantash for everybody now. They're going to be eating the hamantash. That's not really called the hamantash. But the bottom line is now. But now you can, at least in this, you can be a know-it-all. So go ahead and be a know-it-all. But that's the theme of Purim.
But tashin still means pocket, right?
That's the point. Like a hot pocket.
Right, hot pocket.
Is you create a pocket of dough and you stick something in. It didn't have the cutesy little window in which you can see the filling. The point, it used to be entirely covered like a crepe, and that was the point. On the surface you only see one thing, but you bite into it, you go beneath the surface, you see the sweet truth that lies beneath the surface. Perfect way to teach children about this idea.
Of course. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
All right, now
Rabbi, great class, amazing.
go enjoy your muntashen.
I have to go make some.
Right.
I'm on.
All right, can I say happy birthday?
Thank you, yes. Sure.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Are you a March baby too?
I am actually a February baby, but my Hebrew birthday was yesterday.
Yes.
Mazel tov.
Chet Adar. That is why, sure you can hear that I have a particular enthusiasm. When I was born and God said, "That's it. From now on, the month of Adar is a joyous month." Yes,
That's right. It was. It was
Yes.
all because of you.
I'll take full credit. But the bottom line is, yes, he turned 40. I'll tell you, it throws you through a loop. Certain milestones.
40 should not turn you to a loop.
See, 40 is a child.
We can tell you.
Here's the thing. This is what I was telling Nechami. I said, I'm not old, but I'm not young anymore. 40.
Can't use the young excuse anymore.
Yes, 40 is you're no longer young. You're not old, but you're not young.
When I was 39, my mother gave me 2 earrings, but she only gave me one of them. And she said, next year, you'll really like it. Because then you'll have remembered that being 39 wasn't so bad either.
Yes. Well, you know what? The bottom line is my father said it nicely. He says 40 is when you become world wise enough to make better and smarter decisions. And you're still young enough to actually go out, get up and go do something about it.
That's true. That's beautiful.
Very true.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
Do we always be
Rabbi.
on that? Do we always be on that?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody, Shabbat Shalom and Purim
Shabbat
Sameach.
shalom.
תודה, גם לך.